Hello and welcome to now the fourth annual Doiz NFL Fantasy Stats video. As usual, we have a lot to get through with 16 different awards to give out, plus the few little fun ones I like to give out. As it seems to be the case every year, we have new people in our league. However, for the first time since we started this isn't due to people leaving. No. Instead, it's because we've expanded to a 10-man team. We still have the same 8 people from last year, but joining us is Tom's boss, Skeeto, and Matt's best friend, Huff. As for the team lineups, we have another change. Unfortunately, we've lost our second tight end spot, but we've gained back the flex that we lost for it last year. Alongside this, we've had a few point scoring changes, with bonus points being on offer for passes or rushes over 40 and 50 yards respectively, as well as a couple more points for each passing touchdown. To balance things out though, not only are ints worth -2 instead of -1, but if you throw a pick 6, that's a solid -3. Lastly, I'd just like to remind you that we're only looking at the regular season stats here, which is weeks 1 through 14, for these awards. I will mention any noteworthy performances that come from the postseason games, if necessary though. As usual, the draft took place in August, although a combination of the larger rosters and the amount of people in the league meant that for the first time we didn't have 2-minute draft. No, we had a slow draft. A nice thing about this league is that everyone was located in New Zealand. There's been a lot of drafts that a lot of us are in where it is New Zealand people, Americans and all that, and drafts just, they hit the wall when all the Americans go to sleep or when all we go to sleep. So it was nice to just, bang this out and be able to pause the draft overnight. Overall, it only took 3 days for this draft to be completed, which sounds like a long time considering most drafts are usually banged out in a night, but a lot of us had been in rookie drafts that had taken over a week to complete, and that was only 4 rounds of drafting, not 18. At this moment, I'd like to shout out 9 of the 10 players in this draft for being so patient with this draft and not trying to rush it along. And then we have this fucker. But don't worry guys, we made sure we knew when his first pick was, as he was so hyped to get it. All jokes aside, this went really well. And with the season only a few weeks away, instead of a few months when we do our dynasty drafts, surely nothing could go bad between then and now, right? This took all of 2 days from when Kane drafted him to him tearing his shit, which is really super rough for Kane. Anyway, before we knew it, the season was just around the corner. For fuck's sake. Can we just get this started before someone else gets injured? As usual, before we begin with the fun stats part, I'd like to give you a recap of how the playoffs went. With this being a 10-man league, we have way more games than last year, with some of the big differences there being a playoff game for the toilet bowl, and an extra game for the extra 2 players. While Sam and Hamish had the bye, 4 of the most different matches were going on. Firstly, Kelsey took on Kane in an absolute barn burner. Kelsey took an early lead thanks to a man who has tormented Kane for years, Devontae Adams. In fact, Kane was all ready to call it a game, especially after Lamar and Malik Neighbours piled on the points. But the thing about Kane is that his team was at its strongest during the later games. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jared Goff combined for a zesty stack, and Trey McBride continued his great season, still while not scoring a touchdown. Kelsey did have a solid score from James Cook, which helped her maintain her lead, but that being said, her lead was cut to less than 10 after a hefty JSN game. All that was left was Caleb Williams, Cole Kmet, and Jordan Addison for her, versus Kane's Sam Darnold, Bijan Robinson, Aaron Jones, and Jakobi Meyers. While Sam Darnold and Jakobi Meyers disappointed slightly, his running back core put up 32, which left him on 224. Unfortunately, Caleb Williams did not have his best game, which also dragged Kmet down with him, and Jordan Addison couldn't put her ahead, meaning Kane advances on. But beware, as while he is taking out one hunt, her husband is here for revenge. Matt was so confident that he would beat Brad that he offered to give him some of his own bench players to help Brad put up the numbers. Brad could have done with Cooper Rush, who outscored Brock Purdy by about 6 times his final score. Oh, and of course Matt had Puka Nakua too. However, the tides began to shift. Chase Brown did Chase Brown things, while his dad Joe Mixon struggled. Jerry Jeudy and T. Higgins combined for 40, whilst Matt's other running backs in Tyrone Tracy and his boy Saquon Barkley put up paltry numbers. Don't feel too bad for Matt though, as he wasn't too far behind thanks to a big game from Jalen Hurts. However, Matt would not add to his total until the final game, as Amari Cooper put up a goose egg. And even then, the score from Jordan Love was less than Brad's combined contributions from Tucker Kraft and Jahmyr Gibbs. This left Brad with DJ Moore and Kirk Cousins going up against Matt's Keenan Allen and TJ Hawkinson. So in good news, Keenan Allen outscored both his Bears teammate in DJ Moore and Big Kirko. And the added boost from TJ Hawkinson meant that Matt won that day. In bad news, Matt could only reach 144 points, meaning that Brad had booked himself a semi-final match up against Juggernaut Jimmy. Out of a total of 28 points from the season, Skeeter could only secure himself 4. But that didn't crush his hopes. He messaged the chat saying that this was the only game he needed to win, showing that his hopes were high. Cooper Kupp then put up 0. Things didn't get any better, with Nick Chubb breaking his foot and Zach Ertz suffering a concussion. If it wasn't for Aaron Rodgers, then Skeeto would be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. To be fair though, Huff wasn't faring much better. Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Elijah Moore, and Tua Tagovailoa formed the basis of his poor scores, with only his boy, Jaden Daniels, keeping it close. You may be wondering why I'm saying that, even though he has a 20-point lead. Well, he only had 1 player left, while Skeeto had 3. One of those 3 was Marvin Harrison Jr., who continued his absolutely garbage fantasy rookie year. But don't worry, Skeeto fans, as Ramondre Stevenson also had a quiet game, leaving Skeeto 26 points back with 2 players to play. And both of those players scored over 30. James Conner continued to show why he still has a job, whilst Mike Evans crept even closer to his 1,000-yard season, giving Skeeto the upset win and relegating Huff to the toilet bowl. When Debo and Matthew Stafford put up subpar numbers, Brooke was looking like he could send last year's champion from first to worst. This seemed to have been doubled down until a big score from AJ Brown kept Tom in close proximity to Brooke. The underrated goats of Scary Terry and Johnny Smith started to push that out of reach. And then enter Josh Allen. And friends. Now, Tom was leading by 15. A poor showing from Kyler Murray and a pass score from Demario Douglas handed Brooke the lead back, but only just. And worst of all, he was done. No more players left to play. Tom had 2 guys left. And whilst neither of them were too flashy, Jaden Reed and DeAndre Swift gave Tom the points he needed, giving him a nice fun game next week against his boss, while sending Brooke to the Toilet Bowl Championship. In the 7th place playoff, Anthony Richardson and James Conner helped Skeeto get a decent score, but that was about it for him. Meanwhile, alongside the usual AJ Brown and Jonathan Taylor goodness, Deebo Samuel put up 25 points, giving Tom the win against his boss. In the 5th place playoff, a concussion to Jalen Hurts, a dud game from Joe Mixon, and another Amari Cooper no-show left Matt vulnerable, and strikes from Lamar, James Cook, and Caleb Williams meant that Saquon's 30 bomb was wasted, as Kelce took out 5th place. Guess what, guys? Kane was in another absolute barn burner here. Taking on Sam, neither of these guys had players that played before Monday, so they both sit and waited patiently until everyone was unleashed. Boom! 24 from Bijan, 19 from Amon-Ra, 34 from Goff, bang! 36 from Jay Jettis, and nothing too exciting from everyone else. After JSN put up 24 compared to DK's 14, Sam was looking like he needed a hero. Enter Brock Bowers. Normally, you'd hear me saying that in our Madden franchise modes, where Sam loves himself a good tight end and has used Brock Bowers to excellent abilities. But here, Bowers gave him 21 points to get Sam right back into the fight. This was followed up by a Baker Mayfield 26er, leaving the final game deciding who will go to the championship. Sam required a total of 8 points from Josh Jacobs to win the game, and considering Josh Jacobs put up 20, I think it's safe to say that Sam won this match. Hamish got off to a great start against Brad, getting 26 points from Justin Herbert, although Brad did take the lead back a couple days later thanks to Russell Wilson and Mark Andrews. Except one issue there. Hamish had King Henry. As soon as the first batch of Monday games began, a mistake was made by Hamish. He still had Jayden Waddle in his lineup without an auto sub set up. Sure enough, as the games went on, he was ruled out, but Hamish had no replacement for him. Xavier Worthy, who made 21, had played yesterday, and both Adam Thielen, 15, and Jameson Williams, 29, were currently playing. Even if he had moved Waddle to his flex spot, Tajay Spears was also playing right now, putting up 22 points. This could be an issue. If that wasn't enough, Jahmyr Gibbs made Hamish pay instantly, as did T. Higgins, but this was evened out by DTR being the Browns quarterback this week, meaning that Jerry Jeudy was a low scorer. Despite this, Brad sat comfortably with the lead. The issue though was how many players each man had left. Brad only had 2, whilst Hamish had 5. And unfortunately for Brad, Keon Coleman didn't help things out too much. As for Hamish, well, let's just have a listen to some of these guys, eh? Brian Thomas Jr., Geno Smith, and sure, let's toss in Hunter Henry too. This gave Hamish a huge lead, and after Brad's final player, Brock Purdy, had finished his game, he was still in the lead. A few points from CeeDee Lamb and Kendre Miller, though, topped off his win. In the third place playoff, would you believe it that Kane was in a third barn burner? He ended up putting 190, thanks to Sam Darnold, Bijan Robinson, Devonta Smith, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, and Trey McBride. However, Brad put up over 200. Brock Purdy, Jahmyr Gibbs, T. Higgins, and Jerry Jeudy being the pick of the bunch, as Brad is the third place champion. In our championship game, we have Sam and Hamish, the two most dominant Doiz this year, going head to head. Sam probably had the advantage heading into the final, due to the overall health of his team being so much better than Hamish's. Can he use this to get a victory here? Christmas must have come early for Hamish, as King Henry ran all over the Texans, giving him the advantage early on. Sam, being at this game live, decided he would not be taking this laying down, and would have his revenge. At the Patriots-Chargers game, Sam is believed to have snuck his way onto the field and taken Hunter Henry hostage. How else could Hunter Henry put up 0 points in this important game? However, while he did take out Hunter Henry, he didn't take out Hamish's QB1, Justin Herbert, who put up 32. Elsewhere, while Burrow did go off, Hamish did have his wide receiver 1. Huh? What do you mean Chase only put up 19? And hey, Burrow wasn't even Sam's best QB, as Baker Mayfield had an absolute day. Not to be outdone, Hamish had the white boy Adam Thielen himself on his team, who scored all of his team's touchdowns. Garrett Wilson did usual Garrett Wilson things, but Bowers had a quiet game. BTJ and Drake London had some good games, and suddenly it all came down to one game. Sam had a comfortable lead here, but Hamish did have the 49ers RB1 and one of the most boom or bust wide receivers in Jameson Williams. Let's see how they did. Oh. Sam's last hope was a player who had been a little disappointing after his great rookie season last year in Sam Laporta. Kind of funny how Sam's last hope is Sam. He really needs a TD here.
Quick throw, touchdown, Laporta.
Yep, that point there was where Sam retook the lead and claimed the championship. An overall strong team, avoiding injury at the most important time, Sam was definitely the best team this year. But this league ain't called Toilet Bowl for nothing. It is time for the Toilet Bowl Championship. In one corner, we have Huff. Missing out on making the playoffs by 1 point, he then lost to the 4-win Skeeto and found himself here. On the other side, is Brook. Playoff spot was all but secure for him until a losing streak in the final 2 weeks kept knocking him down as the teams beneath him kept winning. Things did not exactly get off to the best start for Brook, with a low 10-point game from Cortland Sutton, whilst Bo Nix, for Huff, was much better. Mahomes, however, got things back on track, and his buddy Travis Kelce didn't do much for Huff. Too bad Zay Flowers had a 100-yard game to keep him in things. Brook had a decision to make. Start Chuba Hubbard, who has had a couple of low-scoring games recently, or Kenneth Walker, who's coming off a few weeks off due to injury. Brook chose Kenneth Walker, and could only watch in horror as Chuba racked up 32 points on his bench. If I had a nickel for every time I benched a running back who made 32 in the playoff finals, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice. It was fine though, as Brian Robinson only made 2.1. Yep, that's right. He only made 2.1, and he was the only Washington player on Huff's team. He didn't have Jaden Daniels put up 47. No siree. While Elijah Moore provided some hope for Brook, as did a good Kyler Murray game, it wasn't until the later game that most of his players started playing. Brook was actually favoured here, as he had 5 players left to Huff's 4, including both of his running backs. Let's see how the Dolphins 49er game went. What the fuck? Devon Achane, George Kittle, and Tyreek Hill all put up decent to amazing scores, whilst Jonnu Smith for Brook put up his projected score. That's okay. How did Kenneth Walker do? Well, that's not 32 points. Maybe Pop Douglas is going to save me? Ooh, that's not looking good. Come on, Rico. You've won me a Dynasty League. Can you win me one here? Okay, surely. The Saints, they've been devastated. They got nothing to play for. Surely Christian Watson can score me 48 points and secure me the win, right? Yep. Your winner of the 2024 Toilet Bowl is me, Brook. We begin our award ceremony with the Spread Their Love Award. This award is given out to the owner who uses the most NFL teams in their fantasy squad. Last year, this was won by Matt in his rookie year. Can he carry over his success to this year? Well, we do have a rookie in third place here, with Skeeto. He ended up using 22 teams this year, although had no love for the Panthers, Broncos, Lions, Packers, Chiefs, Dolphins, Raiders, Eagles, Steelers, or Titans. Beating him by using one more team than him is last year's winner Matt. The teams that Matt didn't use were the Cardinals, Ravens, Seahawks. Fuck, I know he's an Eagles fan, but you are allowed to use other birds, man. The Lions, Dolphins, Patriots, Raiders, Steelers, and Titans. However, first place puts these two both to shame, with 24 teams used. And who is this person? It is Brook. The only teams not used by Brook were the Bills, Lions, Chargers, Vikings, Eagles, Bucks, Saints, and Raiders, please. While no team was used by every team, 2 teams had at least one player on 80% of the teams, being the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jags. While Sam never used the Browns and Brad never used the Jags, Kelsey never used either of those 2 teams. Next up is the Mr. Indecisive Award for picking up the most players through free agency. Last year, Matt went back-to-back with this award as well. In third place, we have someone who was very happy with their team, originally taking until week 4 to make a waiver claim. It's Brad. After taking a few weeks to make a claim, Brad then made at least one claim every week, including in week 14, where he dropped Gus Edwards for the IR-bound Jordan Mason, before picking Edwards up once again the next day after realising that he forgot to delete that waiver. Even if those 2 waivers did not go through, Brad still would have finished in third place, although he would have shared that space with Skeeto. In the end, Brad made 15 total waiver claims during the year. In second place, we have the reigning and defending Mr. Indecisive Award winner, Matt. Most of his 17 pickups came between weeks 2 and 6, including 1 week of a total of 4 roster pickups. Some of these players, like Jordan Mason or Darnell Mooney, became roster mainstays for him, but others, like Samaje Perine and Luke McCaffrey, they were long shots that just didn't work out for him. So, who took out the top spot? Well, I can tell you now it wasn't Kane, who made a total of one roster claim during the entire season, which was Sam Darnold to replace the injured JJ McCarthy. No. Instead, this went to Brook. There were only 2 weeks where Brook didn't pick up a player, due to the lack of production from his earlier draft picks such as DJ Moore and Michael Pittman Jr. But for every Chuba Hubbard and Jonnu Smith that Brook picked up, there was a Tyler Johnson and Pro Bowl Tyler Huntley to balance it out. In the end, Brook picked up a total of 19 players, winning this award for the second time after doing so in 2022, and nets him his second award of the night. Technically, it's my third because I got the championship trophy too. Yeah. If you're sad about not having an award yet, yes, I'm talking to you, Hamish. Don't worry, this award is given out to every team owner. This is the Favourite Team Award, which uses the players picked up throughout the year to decide which NFL team is each owner's favourite this year. First up is Matt, and his favourite team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Matt drafted Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, and once Godwin and Evans went down, picked up Jalen McMillan, to try and hope for a few points here and there. Brad, once again, has his favourite AFC North team as his favourite team this year. That's right, the Pittsburgh Steelers are Brad's favourite team. Brad drafted both George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, as well as Justin Fields, before trading for Russell Wilson later in the season. Tom's favourite team was decided in the draft, as he drafted Josh Allen, Khalil Shakir, and Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. He also had a waiver pickup of Dawson Knox to cover Kincaid when he was injured, which all but confirmed the Bills as his favourite team. Skeeto was not so simple. While most of the teams had 3+ players from a single team on their squads, Skeeto did not. Instead, his highest number of players from the same team was only 2. This meant that he ended up having not 1, but 7 favourite teams. We have the 49ers, CMC and Juwan Jennings, the Colts, Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco, the Jags, Travis Etienne and fucking McCorkle Jones, Cardinals, James Conner and Marvin Harrison Jr., the Jets, Aaron Rodgers and Alan Lazard, the Giants, Wan'Dale Robinson and Tommy DeVito, and the Ravens, Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely. So, does this mean that all of these teams are his favourites? Not at all. You see, while he didn't draft 3 different players from one team, there was one player in that list of players that I just mentioned that he picked up twice, and that person is Joe Flacco, meaning that the Colts are Skeeto's favourite team. Huff made my job so much easier, drafting 4 players from his favourite team, the Miami Dolphins, in the draft, being Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa, Devon Achane, and Raheem Mostert. Kelsey was the only owner this year to have a half player in her favourite team. If you cannot remember from last year, or this is your first NFL stats video, any player who was traded during the season will be counted towards both teams, although only be counted as a half player. So, having drafted Malik Neighbours, Devin Singletary, and Daniel Jones, who was the half player on her team, as well as picking up Darius Slayton and Big Cock Drew Lock, the New York Giants are her favourite team. Side note here, if Deontay Johnson was part of a favourite team, he would only count as a quarter player. 1 quarter to the Panthers, 1 quarter to the Texans, and 2 lots of 1 quarters to the Ravens. Brooks' favourite team this year is the Dallas Cowboys. He picked up his honorary athlete Jake Ferguson, alongside Brandon Cooks, for yoinking Rico Dowdle and Jalen Tolbert as the season went on. Okay, side note here. I usually type the script up around week 14, and at the time of typing, Kane's favourite team had a chance to get the number 1 seed in the NFC, as long as they defeated Kane's real-life team. Yep, after drafting Aaron Jones and JJ McCarthy, as well as picking up Sam Darnold, Kane had the Vikings as his favourite team. Is anyone surprised about Hamish and his favourite team? Bro drafted Alvin Kamara, Rashid Shaheed, and Kendre Miller, then dropped a big boy fab whopper to pick up Derek Carr, meaning the Saints are his favourite team. And then we have Sam. He also had more than one team as his favourite team this year. He drafted Hollywood Brown for the Chiefs, alongside the running back duo of Kyron Williams and Blake Corum for the Rams. Speaking of running back duos, Sam picked up both Carson Steele and Kareem Hunt to round out his Chiefs selections at 3, whilst the pickup of Jordan Whittington also left the Rams on 3. While it would be easy for me to say both teams are his favourite, that would make my editing job a little bit harder. So, making an executive decision, the Rams are Sam's favourite team, as Hollywood Brown was out for almost the entire season and didn't do anything. And I mean, to be fair, also Carson Steele didn't do much for Sam either, so yeah. Rams it is. Congratulations, Sam. And now, we have the Nick Foles Memorial Award for the player who represented the most fantasy teams in the year. Last year, Chigoziem Okonkwo was tossed around teams. But who did this happen to this year? More teams, larger squads, and a real appreciation for the wide receiver 3 RB2 this year, players barely moved around at all, meaning that we don't really have a definitive number 1 answer. Instead, we have multiple players at all 3 positions. So let's have a look, eh? In third place, we have the players who were picked up by one team more than once. Yes, it's that low. So, we have the aforementioned Joe Flacco, as well as Jatavion Sanders. As mentioned earlier, Flacco was picked up by Skeeto to cover an Anthony Richardson injury. Flacco was dropped once Richardson came back, but once Richardson got benched, Skeeto brought him back again. Sanders was dropped by Brooke when Andy Dalton went down with an injury, but after injuries to both Jake Ferguson and Trevor Lawrence, which affected his other tight end Evan Ingram, Brooke brought him back in. In second place, we have any player who was on 2 different teams. This includes the following players: Rico Dowdle, Kareem Hunt, Tyrone Tracy, Braylon Allen, Michael Wilson, Colby Parkinson, Demario Douglas, Tajay Spears, Derek Carr, Elijah Moore, Mike Williams, Mike Gesicki, Michael Pittman Jr., Taysom Hill, Cedric Tillman, Isaac Garendo, Jordan Mason, Andre Yosavash, Patrick Mahomes, Calvin Ridley, Breece Hall, DJ Moore. A lot of these players were just stopgaps, filling the rosters with a player who might come through when their teams needed them the most, with special mentions going to Rico Dowdle, Kareem Hunt, Tyrone Tracy, DJ Moore, and Patrick Mahomes, who put up some big scores for either one, or, in the case of Patrick Mahomes, both of their teams. And finally, in first place, we have any player that was picked up a total of 3 times. Somehow, all 3 of these players were picked up twice by one team, and another team once. First up, Adonai Mitchell. Matt drafted the young stud, but between subpar QB play and being lost in the depth chart, Mitchell did not impress. Sam took a shot on him, but ended up dropping him. However, a roster spot appeared on Sam's roster again, and Sam decided, hey, let's bring back the youngster. Next up is Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson. Brooke drafted him to back up Kyler Murray and CJ Stroud. However, Russell Wilson was out the first 6 weeks with an injury. Brooke's team in general did not get off to a good start, and needing to pick up some other players, Brooke ended up dropping Russell Wilson. However, once he became fit and played a game or 2 for the Steelers, Brooke decided to bring him back, and he surpassed CJ Stroud on Brooke's QB depth chart. Finally though, he was a part of the package that Brooke sent to Brad to get Patrick Mahomes on his team. And finally, we have the funniest player. Sam drafted Gus Edwards on the off chance that he could share the workload with J.K. Dobbins, or if J.K. Dobbins' knees do what they do almost every season. Unfortunately, Dobbins was putting up comeback player of the year material, so Sam ended up casting off Gus Edwards. Brad lured him to his team, and had a starting role ready for him when J.K. went down with injury. However, after a few bad showings, Brad dropped him. You see, Christian McCaffrey had just gone down with an injury, so Brad put in a waiver claim for his backup, Jordan Mason. Unfortunately for Brad, Mason also went down with an injury. No matter, he thought, as he put in a claim for Isaac Garendo, I'll get either Garendo or keep the Gus bus. Waivers came and went, and Isaac Garendo found himself on Hamish's squad. And Jordan Mason on Brad's. It seems as if he forgot to remove that waiver claim. Thankfully, he was able to outbid Brooke and bring back Gus Edwards to his team. Sometimes, all you need is that one player to carry you on their back. And this is what this award is. The One Man Army Award. AJ Brown won this award last year on Sam's team. Can he repeat it again this year? In third place, we have the one and only Lamar Jackson. Week 10 against the Bengals, Lamar Jackson went band for band with Joe Burrow. In fact, while we're here, I just got to mention Joe Burrow's performance here would have been fourth on this list. But back to Lamar, in this game, he threw 4 TDs for 290 yards plus 33 rushing yards, netting 35% of Kelsey's points for the week. But we are not done with week 10 yet, as Jamar finds himself above Lamar. Chase had an unreal 264 receiving yards, a mere 26 less yards than the entire Ravens offense, and 3 TDs to his name, giving him 61.4 points. The fact that this was only 35.2% of Hamish's team's total that week really speaks volumes about how strong his team was at that point. Before we get to the number 1 spot, I have a couple of honourable mentions. First up, we're going back to week 10 again. This week seemed to be on crack, as Bijan put up 25.62% of Kane's points, the aforementioned Joe Burrow 34.17% for Sam, and even Jalen Hurts putting up 22.6% for Matt, and Brock Purdy 20% of Brad's points. Week 7, Josh Allen put up 30.85% of Tom's points, thanks to a 2 TD 300 yards game. Week 14, Jordan Addison helped Kelsey beat Skeeto, giving her a victory heading into the playoffs with his 3 TD game, putting up 30.38% of Kelsey's points that week. Week 14, Josh Allen and his 6 TD game put up 43.13% of Tom's points. However, Josh Allen was disqualified due to Tom starting Alexander Mattison on his starting lineup, who was out that week. To be fair to Tom, however, he had no other running backs on his bench that he could start. And lastly, Patrick Mahomes was the only player to top score for 2 teams, as he top scored for Brad in week 9 and Brooke in weeks 11 and 12. Anyway, number 1 went to who else but Lamar. Yes, that's right, this year's award is a Lamar Jamar Lamar sandwich. While his stats might not have been as good as his week 10, he helped Kelsey score 40% of her team's points that week, tossing 5 TDs in the process. However, despite all this, she still lost that week, a rough outcome after Jackson's efforts. Yoho, Big Summer Blowout. That's right, it's time for the Big Summer Blowout and Just the Tip Awards, for the biggest and smallest victories this year respectively. Last year's victories ranged from a win by less than 2 points and an absolute mashing by 95 points. Will this year be just as wild? Well, we start our Big Summer Blowout with a mashing of 95 points. During week 4, Hamish was taking on Skeeto. At this point, Skeeto was 2-4, needing a decent outing here to get back on track. So what did Skeeto's team do? Well, let's have a look, eh? Anthony Richardson, 5.24. Travis Etienne, 7. Demario Douglas, 4.3. Kyle Pitts, 0. Despite all this, Skeeto still put up a relatively decent score of 115, bolstered by a Mike Evans 23-pointer. Hamish eclipsed that with his first 5 players. Aside from them, Xavier Worthy and Jamison Williams put up big 19-point games, giving Hamish a final score of 211 and a victory of 95.76. Even earlier than that, in week 2, we had a matchup between Sam and Tom. Tom, coming off a decent win against Brooke, was feeling confident in his matchup. But on the other side of him was a juggernaut in Sam. Sam had some absolute weapons in his team, and they all came to play this week. Baker baked up a 22-point bomb, Jay Jettis was his usual self in a 26-point game, and DK Metcalf exceeded 30 points to help Sam get to 180. In fact, only Sam Laporta scored under 10 points for Sam. Meanwhile, on Tom's side, only Jonathan Taylor, Josh Allen, and Deebo Samuel scored over 10 points for Tom, and even then, Allen was a disappointment with only 11 points. An injury to AJ Brown meant that Tom had to sub in Gus Edwards, who only made 6 points. D-Hop couldn't even make 2 points, and Matthew Stafford got smothered by the Cardinals' defense, only making 7.64 points. In the end, Tom finished on 83.7 points, losing by a total of 97.12. But Sam wasn't done yet. He wanted that 100-point victory. Skeeter was licking his wounds after a big loss to Hamish, and was not having much success after the first couple of games. So this Week 7 matchup was already going to be a bloody battle. Some of his team tried hard to help him win this week. James Conner did James Conner things, rushing for 100 yards and putting up 17.2 points. Kyle Pitts got a few receptions for 13.5 points, and Aaron Rodgers did fine. But there was only one touchdown scored by Skeeto's team, being from Mike Evans, meaning that his team only scored a modest total of 95.2 points. I'm not even going to try and sugarcoat this, I'm just going to read out what Sam's team got. Baker Mayfield, 33. Josh Jacobs, 20.2. David Montgomery, 8. Jay Jettis, 21.4. Garrett Wilson, 13.1. Brock Bowers, 19.3. DK Metcalf, 19.9. Kyron Williams, 19.6. Kareem Hunt, 22.3. Joe Burrow, 18.94. This team put up nearly 200, which already would have been a massive win, but against Skeeto, it ended up being a 100.54 point loss. Before I get to just the tip, here's a few honourable mentions from some big games. The rematch between Sam and Tom is closer, but despite a Matthew Stafford 38.8 point game, Tom still loses by 43. The aforementioned Week 1 game of Brooke vs Tom started well, but players like Scary Terry, Evan Ingram, Deontay Johnson, and Jake Ferguson scoring less than 5 meant that Tom won by just over 45. After losing to him in Week 1 by a lot, Brooke flips the script and beats Tom by 45 this time, thanks to trade acquisitions Calvin Ridley and Patrick Mahomes. Brooke's team fails to turn up in Week 11, and Kelsey capitalises with a 45-point win. Tom slowed down Hamish's roll with a 46 win, thanks to an Alexander Mattison masterclass, of all people. A large brain play from Kane to start Zach Charbonnet in Week 3 began the downfall of Skeeto, as Kane won by a massive 47 points. Despite nearly 50 points from Rodgers and Cup, Skeeto goes down in Week 9 to Tom by 48. While Huff's team wasn't the worst in Week 4, big boy scores from Malik Neighbours and Nico Collins helped Kelsey hold Huff to a 49-point loss. After one NFL game, the score between Hamish and Kelsey was 75-42. Hamish kept that lead, winning by just under 50. The next week, however, Kelsey rebounded, beating up Brooke by 55. And the week after that, Kelsey put down Tom, winning by the same amount. Projected scores in this Tom vs Huff Week 8 matchup were near identical. Tom outscored his projections by 10. Huff outscored his projections by 70. This was all thanks to Bo Nix, Devon Achane, and the trio of Jason Kelsey. And the tight end trio of Travis Kelsey, George Kittle, and Cade Otton going to town. Kane finally decided to start Sam Darnold in Week 5, who proceeded to put up a whopping 4 points. Meanwhile, Brooks' quarterbacks put up 50, DJ Moore had a rare good game, and he defeated Kane by 60 points. However, Kane and Sam Darnold returned with a vengeance in Week 14, keeping Brooke in the Toilet Bowl playoffs with a 63-point win, thanks to 50 from Sam Darnold and 20 from Bijan Robinson. When you can only muster 128 points against Sam, you're going to have a bad time, and Matt found this out the hard way, especially after Sam put up over 200, leading to an 83-point fisting. In the same week that Sam had absolutely mashed Skeeto for 100, Matt put up 180 thanks to his Eagle stack. Meanwhile, Tom managed a solid 15 points from his 5 players combined, going down by a total of 92 points. Alrighty, so on the flip side, we have the Just the Tip Award. Week 9 brought us some great matchups, and none better than Sam and Kane. Both teams nearly put up 200 points each. Whenever one player faltered, another one covered the slack. Jared Goff only made 11, well here's JSN with 38 points. Only 10 points from Kyron? Well don't worry, Garrett Wilson has 30. However, one team had to lose, and unfortunately, losing by only 2.02 points, was Kane. In Week 2, Hamish had a lot of players disappoint him. Jaden Waddle, Jamar Chase, Dallas Goedert, and Xavier Worthy all put up duds. But he was bailed out by Kamara and his big dick 47-point game against the Cowboys. Brad was also let down by a lot of his AFC North players, but Calvin Ridley, J.K. Dobbins, and Rashee Rice more than made up for them. When it came to the final scores, however, Brad put up 161.62 and Hamish 162.92, winning by 1.3 points. In one of the most exciting games, we have Hamish versus Skeeto. Hamish took an early lead and kept it for almost the entire week. However, Skeeto never gave up and found himself only 13 points behind Hamish heading into the final game. While Hamish had no players left, Skeeto had Nick Chubb. While Nick Chubb had not been at his best recently, he only needed a touchdown and maybe a couple of catches to get him into the game. And sure enough, Jameis Winston finds him in the end zone for a touchdown, putting Chubb on 12.5 points. Things are getting close, and Jameis and the Browns are advancing again. They're getting closer and closer to the end zone, but instead of using Nick Chubb as the running back, they're using Jerome Ford. Chubb is nowhere to be seen. Things are really starting to look dire for Skeeto, but his hero, Nick Chubb, is back on the field. Once again, Jameis has made his way down to the Broncos' end zone. He targets Nick Chubb, but is unfortunately picked off. Browns never get the ball back, and Hamish wins by 0.66 points. Before I start on our next award, here's a few honourable mentions for this Just the Tip award. Due to injuries in the bye, Brad was forced to start players like Miles Sanders and the pre-Jameis Jerry Jeudy. But of course, T. Higgins came to his rescue, putting up 29, meaning that Brad only lost by 9.96. Kane vs Huff was almost a mirror match in week 2. Trevor Lawrence and Jaden Daniels scored in the mid-teens. Tua and Goff, both single digits. Devon A-Chain made high 20s, as did Amon-Ra St. Brown. Zay Flowers and Chris Godwin made mid-20s, as did Devonta Smith and JSN. But in the end though, a 1-point Travis Kelce game gave Kane the win by 9.94. Also in week 2, Skeeto got his first win against Matt in a close game. He won by 9.87 points thanks to a Luke McCaffrey goose egg for Matt. Even though Mandrews made 0 and Calvin Ridley 1.9, Rashee Rice and Brock Purdy almost bailed Brad out. He still went down though by 9.52 points to Brock in week 3. Baker Mayfield puts up 38 points, which helps Sam pull off a 9.54 point win against Brad in week 1. Joe Burrow puts up 47, which helps Sam pull off an 8.5 win against Brad in week 10. Wait, what do you mean that Sam lost that game? Tom was absolutely fucked, having a very slim chance of beat Brad. However, this was week 14, and Tom had Josh Allen. 62 points later, and Tom is your victor by 7.3. This was a battle of the Ravens, with Lamar's 42.42 points outscoring Joe Flacco's 36.56, giving Kelce the 6.96 win over Skeeto. Patrick Mahomes not only had a bad game, but absolutely shredded the shit out of Rashee Rice's knee, screwing over Brad in the long run. However, Brad still beat Matt this week by 6.4. Despite Tucker Kraft laying a goose egg, it's the battle of the Bengals that decides this game. While Jamar Chase makes 26 for Hamish, T. Higgins puts up 31 for Brad as he wins by 5.68. Skeeto puts up the second highest score during week 1, still loses by 5.32 to Huff. Skeeto started Mac Jones in the year 2024. He deserved to lose this match by more than the 5.16 that he lost by. Skeeto needed more from Travis Etienne, who'd been a little disappointing as of late, to help him beat Brad. Etienne responded with his negative 0.1 and Skeeto lost by 4.38. While Baker and his 4 TDs helped Sam to a very decent score, 2 of those TDs went to his opponent's player, losing by 4.28 to Huff in week 6. Trey McBride made 0, Devonta Smith made 0, Tom only beat Kane by 2.7 thanks to busts from Alec Pierce, Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen. Alrighty, it's intermission time. Sit back and relax while I whip through some fun awards here. First up is the Woman Lover of the Year award. Well, it would be, but after checking the previous year's stats, we have an update for this name. As I've mentioned in a previous video, if you win this award 3 times, you'll have the award named after you. This means that this is now known as the Bradley Clark Woman Lover of the Year award. This award is awarded to the player who either drafts or picks up Deshaun Watson from free agency. Yes, somehow, for the last 3 years, Deshaun Watson ended up on Brad's team, including the year that he sat out the entire year. Anyway, this award goes to Tom after he drafted Deshaun Watson this year. The actual Woman Lover of the Year award goes to 4 men, being Huff, Skeeto, Brooke, and the aforementioned Tom. All 4 of these guys never bet Kelsey this year because they all respect women. In fact, to show how much they really respect all of the wahine, they all lost twice to her. Next up is the best and worst names of the year. Winning his 3rd intermission award this year with the worst name of the year is Tom, with Saints and Raiders, please. Not only is he naming his team after one of the worst teams in the AFC and the Raiders, he's also naming his team after one of the worst teams in the NFC and the Saints. As for the best name, well, this could only go to one person. As this is Black History Month, Brooke is the winner of this award, not only naming his team the Athletes, but also only using black players, alongside honorary athlete Jake Ferguson.
You are freaking African Americans plus Mark. You know what I'm saying? Which I'm rocking with Mark.
The Median Motherfucker Award is going to the number 1 seed, Sam. Yes, he did finish as the top seed, but without the median wins, Hamish would have finished as the number 1 seed. How the turns tabled from last year. The Jalen Hurts, I bet he does, award is awarded to Kelsey for winning in Week 5, despite injuries to Nico Collins and Xavier Legette, who she started, and Devontae Adams, Jalen Warren, Devin Singletary, Malik Neighbours, Taysom Hill, and Luke Musgrave, who are all on her bench. Likewise, the Tis But a Scratch award is given to Huff for losing his wide receiver 1 and 2 in Chris Godwin and Brandon Ayuk, before putting up a whopping 216 points the very next week. Foster's Home for Unwanted Players is awarded to Brad for picking up the most players that had been dropped by other owners, with 8. The No N-Word award goes to Tom for somehow not having a player whose first name started with the letter N or any other letters that followed after N in the alphabet. Finally, we have another award that has been renamed. The Cardio Kings Award is now being known as the T. Higgins Cardio Kings Award. This award is given out to any player who scores 0 points whilst being on the active squad of any team. The winners of this award this year are Cortland Sutton, Luke McCaffrey, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts, Rashee Rice, Marvin Harrison Jr., Alec Pierce, Dallas Goddard, Tank Dell, Deebo Samuel, Cole Kmet, Ricky Pearsall, Tucker Kraft, Cole Kmet again, and Jaden Reed. Alrighty, it's back once again. It's time for Busts of the Week. With a lot of players sitting on 2 wins of this award, could we see this award being renamed for the end of the presentation? Week 1 was pretty easy to decide. I didn't even have to think too hard about it. Marvin Harrison Jr. 1.4 points from the arguable best rookie wide receiver in this draft class. So much hype, and for what? Skeeto only lost by 7 points, and he was the second highest scorer of the week. Imagine if Marvin Harrison had caught more than the 1 pass that he did. Next up, in week 2, we have an even tighter loss by 1.3 points. Brad had not got off to the best of starts, kind of like his Cincinnati Bengals in real life, and his poor beginnings continued on here. And who caused him the most pain? Patrick Mahomes. Not only did he defeat the aforementioned Bengals, he even had a horrid game fantasy points wise, made worse by the fact that he threw not 1, but 2 ints. Even if one of them was a sick one-handed grab by Cam Taylor-Britt. But in the end, his disappointing score is the reason that Brad lost that week, which gives him Bust of the Week. Hey Brad, welcome back to Bust of the Week. Going up against the equally hapless Brooke, Brad would have expected a good chance of winning here. I mean, he was projected to be the winner of this matchup in the beginning, but a score of 6.9, nice, from T. Higgins, 1.9 from Calvin Ridley, and 0 from Mark Andrews, our Bust of the Week this week, caused Brad to end up being the loser. Mark Andrews has been on a massive point slump this year, with his goose egg this week being the 3rd low score of the season. And this is followed up by another one the next week. I was late at writing this one, I'm sorry. Giving him a total of 12.5 points from 3, now 4 weeks. Week 4 was rough, especially for one guy, Matt. He went up against Brad, a notorious shit talker, especially when it comes to Matt, and lost by 6 points. And while players like Andre Josevach and Brenton Strange scored low scores, these players weren't exactly projected high scores to begin with. You know who was projected to score high? Heenan Allen. Now, he didn't exactly have a bad game per se, but when the benched Lad McConkey scored 13 more points than Allen, which would have netted Matt the win, yeah, there's no one else it could have gone to. And even though that Brad was at a camp during the week that this happened, he made sure to let Matt know who Daddy was. No, not you, Hamish. Week 5 was easy. I didn't even have to think about it too hard. Marvin Harrison Jr. 5.6 points from the arguable best rookie wide receiver in this draft class. So much hype, and for what? Skeeto only lost by 7 points. Wait a minute. Haven't I already gone over all of this? Yes, once again, a 7-point loss and a low score from Marvin Harrison Jr. led to Skeeto losing this week. And the thing is, week 1, he had 3 targets, so his scoring chances were low. This week, he had a total of 7 and could only manage 2 catches. This means that, within 5 weeks of him coming to the NFL, Marvin Harrison Jr. has the potential to have this award named after him. Originally, DK Metcalf was a lock for Bust of the Week this week. 11 targets for only 3 receptions is very bust-worthy, but the thing is, he had not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns ruined. He had a 52-yard touchdown called back due to an illegal shift, another touchdown called out of bounds by a toe, and a third potential touchdown messed up by an underthrown ball. So instead, we have the Bears wide receiver, who only made 6 points and whose owners lost because of them. Wait, what do you mean there's 2 people that this fits? And while I was prepared to give it to both of them, Sam really didn't have any other options. Sure, he could have supported his team and played Drake May over Joe Burrow, but in what world would that be the plan? Aside from Michael Wilson, who benefited from the Marvin Harrison Jr. concussion, the rest of his team either made 0 or were on the bye. Meanwhile, all 4 of Brooks' wide receivers made more than DJ Moore, including Jalen Tolbert, and his team got booty fucked by the Lions. Also, to be fair, Roma Dunze scored the same from a low target share. Holy fuck, can I even find a bust this week that didn't get injured? So many players went down this week. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, Jaden Daniels, Pro Bowl Tyler Huntley, Travis Etienne. I think that covers it all? Oh wait, there was one more.
Encouragement. See the emotion outpouring from Deshaun Watson. Unbelievable.
Anyway, this has made my job a lot harder. No games were close, ranging from 30 points to over 100 points. So, how could I give this to one person? Well, I didn't. One team played 3 players from one team, and everyone on that score scored well under their projected total. So, instead of just one player, I'll be giving this to 3 players. I've lost by about 30, and the trio of Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Tyreek Hill was short about 22 points between them. Sure, if they had scored their projected, Huff still would have lost. But here's the thing. Huff also had not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 players go down injured. He needed a lot from his healthy players, and these 3 just didn't show up. And that's with a Pro Bowler throwing them the ball. We had ourselves potential for a great shootout in Week 8. Matt was coming off a near 100-point victory over last year's winner Tom, and Hamish was 11-3. These 2 teams were evenly matched coming down to the final game. Matt led by just under 4 points, relying on Jordan Mason to get him the dub. Hamish, however, had the one and only CD Lamb. And, as quickly as this match had started, it had ended. Jordan Mason was done for the night, only making a measly 1.8 points. Meanwhile, Lamb proceeded to rack up nearly 8 times the amount needed to secure the win for Hamish. But do you want to know the worst part? Despite going off injured early on in the game, Jordan Mason wasn't even the lowest scorer of the week for Matt. That instead goes to the recipient of this week's Bust of the Week, Amari Cooper. Cooper could only haul in one of his 2 targets for 3 yards and a whopping 1.3 points. Sure, Even if Matt had started Lad McConkey over him, who dropped a 32 bomb on Matt's bench, he still would have lost. But it's the thought that counts. This week had only one real shootout, Sam versus Kane. Nearly 400 points between these two, with Sam just eking out the victory by 2 points. So, what went wrong for Kane? Jared Goff. That's right, the Lions fan was let down by his own team's QB. The well-known saying is that nobody beats Goff, but in this instance, Sam beats Goff all in Kane's face. Despite going 18 for 22, his 11.6 points were a far cry from his projected 20 points. And, worst of all, the only player who would have made Kane more points if he had started was Trevor Lawrence, meaning that Kane was one choice away from winning here, and unfortunately, he made the wrong one. This is a very rough week for Sam, with most of his bench containing guys on the bye, so he didn't have a lot of choices here for his active team. However, when he has players like Baker Mayfield, Justin Jefferson, and Garrett Wilson, that really shouldn't matter, right? Not at all. These three barely managed to crack 30 points, and if it wasn't for Joe Burrow's near 50 bomb, Sam would not have come anywhere close. So, who deserves the Bust of the Week award out of those three? Honestly, it was a tough choice, but I had to give it to Justin Jefferson. One of the best wide receivers currently playing, and he scores under 10, you'd feel pretty shortchanged with that, especially when he could only haul in 5 of his 9 targets. A couple more of those receptions caught could have led Sam to the victory here. This award should have either gone to Alvin Kamara or Derrick Henry this week. These two have been the pillars of Hamish's dominance, regularly scoring in the mid to high 20s. This week, they made a total of 22 points between the two of them. However, they weren't the only people to let Hamish down. Jaden Waddle has been disappointed all season, and Drake London couldn't do much either. In fact, Drake London is the Bust of the Week for his performance. How did he beat out Kamara and Henry? Well, the only other running back Hamish could have used was Samir White, and he made 0.9 points. We compare this to wide receivers now, where Hamish had Xavier Worthy, 16.8, on the bench, as well as Jameson Williams, 25.6. Either one of these two wide receivers would have got Hamish the win over Brad, but he had them warming the bench instead. This was a very rough week for Sam, with most of his bench containing guys on the bye, so he did not have a lot of choices when it came to his active team. However, when he has players like Baker Mayfield, Justin Jefferson, and... Hold on, I've already done this story before, haven't I? Yes, the thing that happened to Sam a couple of weeks ago, it happened again. Most of his bench was on the bye, Sam lost by just over 10 points, and Justin Jefferson, once again, was about 10 points under his projection. And, after first winning this award in week 3 of 2022, this is Justin Jefferson's third win, which means that this award will now be known as the Justin Jefferson Bust of the Week Award. Alright, let's set the scene. It is the middle of the fourth quarter. The Browns are down 31-25 to the Broncos. Suddenly, Nick Chubb hauls in a TD, and the Browns lead. In a paid league, Brook is now 1 point behind his opponent. In this league, Skeeto is 1 point behind Hamish. As I'd mentioned earlier, a lot of things were happening here. Jerome Ford was being used as our main running back. Jameis had thrown a pick 6. And a defensive pass interference call had left the Browns on the 2-yard line. Jameis hands off the ball, but it's a fake. Worst of all, his pass gets picked off, and the Broncos win this game. So that means that both Brook and Skeeto lose a matchup by 1 point. So, does this make Nick Chubb Bust of the Week? Of course not. With how well A-Rich and Mike Evans played, this game should not have been this close. A Christian McCaffrey injury did hurt Skeeto's odds, but even if he didn't get injured, McCaffrey would not be Bust of the Week. Instead, this award goes to Cooper Kupp. Only making 17 yards from his 6 targets is bad enough, but seeing how close this game was in the end makes his 50% reception rate look even worse. We have ourselves an issue here. No one really did a bad job this week. Almost no results changed any outcomes. The 6 teams making the playoffs have made the playoffs. The top 2 teams stayed the same. The 4 losers are still losers. So, what do? Who gets Bust of the Week? Well, for the first time in this award's history, I will not name a Bust of the Week this week. While no huge changes occurred this week, Brad did fall in the rankings due to his loss to Tom, and will be taking on Matt in the wildcard instead of it being Kane. If Brad loses this game to Matt, but would have beaten Kane, then the Bust of the Week would go to T. Higgins. Otherwise, I guess Mac Jones will get it. Sure, he did bad. Okay, so it turns out that T. Higgins was a guardian angel for Brad. Because not only did he put up nearly 20 points this week for Brad in his win against Matt, but Kane also scored nearly 100 points more than Brad, thus would have eliminated him for the playoffs. So, that means that Mac Jones is last week's bust of the week. Now, to this week. We saw 4 very different games this week. Brooke limped to yet another loss to Tom, while Skeeto won when it mattered the most. Kane and Kelsey both put up 200 points each, with Kane eking out the win. And finally, Brad came from behind to knock out the powerhouse Matt. I guess when you live by the Saquon Barkley, you also die by the Saquon Barkley. While Pittsburgh does have a great run defense, and also Minka Fitzpatrick, hater of knees, the fact that Barkley couldn't muster 75 scrimmage yards is not the best for Matt. I was also considering Joe Mixon for this award, who could only rush for 23 yards against a poor run defense in Miami, but I mean, come on. Once a Bengal, always a Bengal. He's helping out Brad here. Imagine putting up 130 points and still losing. Now imagine putting up 190 points and still losing. Well, that was the case for Kane this week. Him and Sam had a big dick competition, and both came packing. Only one player had that small dick energy, and that's our bust of the week, Trey McBride. Only 5 points from his tight end is a poor showing during a game like this. He was 10 points under his projected, and Kane really could have done with those 10 points, going down by 12. Worst of all, his backup tight end, Dalton Schultz, made 15 on his bench. Rough stuff. Sam saw this week's bust of the week live this week. Hunter Henry. Hamish's team had been ravaged by injuries, meaning that he basically had to choose his team by who's healthy, not who's the better player. Players like Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, and Dallas Goedert were all riding his bench injured. But guess what? They all made the same amount of points as Hunter Henry did. As I mentioned in the intro, this was a close game, and having one player not score is a true kick in the gooch. If he had hauled in his 2 targets, this game might have swung the other way, and Hamish might have been the winner of this season. Alright, let's recap the winners of the Justin Jefferson Busts of the Week awards. Marvin Harrison Jr., Patrick Mahomes, Mark Andrews, Keenan Allen, Marvin Harrison Jr. again, DJ Moore, the trio of Devon Achane, Tyreek Hill, and Raheem Mostert, Amari Cooper, Jared Goff, Justin Jefferson, Drake London, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Mac Jones, Saquon Barkley, Trey McBride, Hunter Henry. What better way to follow up one long award than with a second long award, with the best and worst draft picks of each round? Or, as it's known now after 3 years of winning in their respective rounds, the Always Draft Tyreek Hill Award for the best draft pick, and the Don't Draft Darren Waller Award for the worst draft pick. In the first round, the best draft pick was Lamar Jackson, who put up just shy of 400 points, whereas the worst draft pick went to Christian McCaffrey, who obviously had an injury at the start of the year, played a few games, and then got injured. In the second round, Joe Burrow was easily the best pick of the lot, putting up 374 points. However, this is already the first round where the total points and the active points differ for the worst draft pick. For the active points, Breece Hall wins this award, only scoring 141 points for his teams whilst being active. Whereas if we take into consideration all of the points that they scored during the season, then Anthony Richardson narrowly beats out Travis Kelce for the worst player on the list. In round 3, Jared Goff, no one could beat him. He is the best draft pick here. And once again, we have 2 different for the worst draft picks. Active points, once again, Travis Etienne on 75.4 points. However, for total points scored, it goes to Chris Olave, who had his season cut short due to a horrific injury, on 76.7. Okay, so this is an interesting one here. In round 4, Justin Herbert would have been the best draft pick if he had started every game. However, Hamish didn't start him every game, So instead, the best draft pick that round goes to the one and only Devon Achane. As for the worst draft pick, once again, the numbers different here. Isaiah Pacheco is the worst draft pick for games started, only scoring 40 points, whereas overall the worst draft pick for that round is Isaiah Pacheco. The reason that the numbers are different is because he played a total of one game where Brad didn't start him. So congratulations, Isaiah Pacheco. You had a horrible season, unfortunately. For round 5, Jaden Daniels is the best draft pick here. He had the highest points scored whilst being active, and the most points scored in total. As for the worst draft pick, active points wise, it goes to DJ Moore, who could only muster 94.9 points. However, total points scored goes to Deebo Samuel with 119. In a very close battle here, round 6 has a couple of best draft picks. Points scored, Josh Jacob wins this award with 229 points, although the highest total points scored goes to Matthew Stafford for 236. As for the worst draft pick, this goes to Brandon Ayuk, who only managed 63 points before going down injured for the season. Another really close battle for the best draft pick here. For active points scored, this goes to Malik Neighbours and his 182 that he scored for Kelsey. However, for total points scored, it goes to Kane's Aaron Jones, 187. As for the worst draft pick, this easily goes to Matt's Amari Cooper. 86 points when he started, and 106 points total. Round 8, and there is easily one definitive best draft pick here, Baker Mayfield, 321 points. As for the worst draft pick, for active points, this goes to Calvin Ridley, only scoring 75.9 points. But for total points, it goes to Tank Dell, who, like a few of these draft picks, had their season cut short due to injury. In round 9, another definitive winner here, Brock Bowers. 196 points whilst active, 208 points total. As for the worst draft pick, hey, we got another definitive pick here. And once again, it's a player whose season was cut short due to injury. Rashee Rice, 66.9 points. Round 10, and our best draft pick is another clear winner. Aaron Rodgers, 227, narrowly beating David Montgomery's 217. As for the worst draft pick, well, this one's tough, because this is the first occurrence of a player never starting for their team. Therefore, Zamir White would be disqualified, meaning that Deshaun Watson is the worst draft pick in this position. However, when it comes to total points, Zamir White is the clear worst player here. How the hell did he only score 29 points? That is wild. In round 11, same player, best points active and best points total, Chase Brown. As for the worst draft pick, this is a little harder. Devin Singletary wins it on active points, only scoring 13 points, whilst Nick Chubb had the lowest score, total, with 61 points. Round 12 now, and our best draft pick goes to Chris Godwin for his 142 points. However, this is another situation of Hamish not starting a quarterback who went on to absolutely smash the competition in this round. Geno Smith would have been the best draft pick with 238 points. As for the worst draft pick, active points wise is Keon Coleman for Brad, who only made 37. However, for total points wise, this goes to Hollywood Brown and JJ McCarthy, who both made 0. Yes, I know they made 0 and I said that I wouldn't count them, but the thing is, this is total points scored I'm talking about. That means during the entire year, they were worth nothing. Radio round 13, and the best draft pick goes to Jordan Addison, 172 points. However, if we're looking at the total points here, this would go to JSN, 201 points. The worst draft pick here on active points goes to Chigoziem Okonkwo for his 26.6, but in reality would go to Blake Corum for his 21.9 points throughout the year. Round 14 now, and our best draft pick, which is really surprising when you look at how well his season went, Brian Thomas Jr. being drafted this late with 129 points. However, he is 0.3 points short of the first place from total points, as Jerry Jeudy put up 188.4. As for the worst draft pick, Isaiah Likely with 4.6 points for Skeeto, not looking too good there. As for the total points, however, this goes to Ben Sinnott, 12.1. Round 15 now, and our best draft pick, J.K. Dobbins, 145.1. He is also the best draft pick on total points, beating out Khalil Shakir by 10 points. As for the worst draft pick, for active point score, it goes to Brooks Brandon Cooks, who was drafted in case CeeDee Lamb decided to sit out this year. But of course, they got his contract sorted after the draft, but before the season began. Total points, however, it also goes to Brandon Cooks, although Trey Benson was only 2 points ahead of him. Round 16 now. Huge difference between first and second place in active points scored. This goes to Bo Nix for his 128. And obviously, he smashes the competition in total points as well, 267. The worst draft pick for round 16, in terms of active points, goes to Rashid Shaheed, 8.3 points. He absolutely killed it on Hamish's bench. However, the worst draft pick for total points goes to Jalen Wright. Wright only managed 26.8 points, being relegated to being an RB3 for the Dolphins. Round 17, the best draft pick goes to Brad with Justin Fields, 103 points. For total points, though, it goes to Matt for 175 points for Bucky Irving. As for the worst draft pick, active points-wise, it's Xavier Legette, narrowly beating out Gabe Davis. But for total points scored, it could only go to Kendre Miller, who could muster a massive 16.5 points. And finally, in round 18, the best draft pick was, the guy that actually got to start a few games, Hunter Henry, with 56.3 points. Was he the overall best draft pick in round 18? No, that went to Brooks Tyrone Tracy, who scored 145 points. Most of the points coming after Brooks dropped him, of course. As for the worst draft pick, unfortunately this goes to Gardner Minshew, as almost all of the remaining players didn't actually get any playtime. However, the worst overall draft pick for that round, Michael Penix. This is just before he took over from Kirk Cousins, so only had 1.5 fantasy points, narrowly beating out Marshawn Lloyd, who had 2.8. Our next award is the Fair Trade Award. Now, the last 2 years have not been too kind for Brooke in terms of trades. Sure, a lot of those trades are in dynasty leagues though, where it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. However, can he win this award for a third time and have this award named after him? Just a reminder that although it's not just the Toilet Bowl League that I'm looking at, the only trades that I am looking at have to have Doiz on both sides of it, not just one. Firstly, we have 3 trades that are ineligible for this year. The first one is a trade between Hamish and Brad in the longest yard. Hamish gave up pick 403 in this year's draft for Brad's third round pick in next year's draft. Brad ended up drafting KC tight end Jared Wiley, who rode his taxi squad for the entire year, whereas the pick that Hamish got ended up being pick 306. However, since this pick hasn't happened yet, it can't be counted. The next trade was between Brad and Hamish in the longest yard, again. This time, Brad gave his second round pick next year for Chase Brown. Currently, Hamish still has the pick, which is pick 208, so we should be seeing this trade evaluated next year. But Chase Brown has had a really good season for Brad so far. Final trade involves Brad again, but this time it's with Sam in Ladd's Dynasty. Brad gave away Kendre Miller to get Sam's third round pick in 2025, which became pick 309. Funnily enough, Brad also has picks 307 and 308 in that league. Anyway, our first trade of this year, and the most fair trade of the all, is the only one that happened in the Toilet Bowl. Wanting to get rid of DJ Moore, Brooke offered a trade to Brad, who countered with a different trade offer. Brooke was very hesitant to give up what Brad was asking for, but as soon as Brad uttered the phrase, "Mahomes is Mahomes, even bad weeks are fine," Brooke accepted the trade. Brooke ended up trading DJ Moore, Russell Wilson and Breece Hall for Patrick Mahomes and a man that Brooke has said multiple times he'll never pick up again, Calvin Ridley. Somehow, both sides of this trade averaged about 36 points per week for their team, with Brad's side averaging half a point more than Brooke, meaning that Brad wins this trade by half a point per week. Another close trade on the fairness scale was between the same guys, this time in the longest yard. With Rashee Rice's off-field issues looming, Brooke was open to trading him away. Brad came in with 3 different trade offers for Brooke to choose from, and Brooke ended up choosing the trade offer that Brad thought was the least likely to be accepted. Brooke gave up Raishi Rice and Big Pat Fryermuth to acquire the services of one Trey McBride. After a couple of weeks, this trade looked like another one of Brooke's classic bad trades, with Raishi Rice piling on the points. However, one heat-seeking Patrick Mahomes to Raishi Rice's knee, and that was Rice's season done. And once the playoffs began, Brooke was averaging 12.66 points per week from McBride, compared to the 12.06 points Brad was getting from the combination of Rice and Fryermuth. While this doesn't sound like big scores, this is a half PPR league. And while playoff games do not count towards my ranking in this, Trey McBride averaged 17.66 points per game in the playoffs, which helped Brooke as he took home the championship that year. Staying in the longest yard, we have a trade between Sam and Brad. Brad had a need for QB, and Sam had a QB up for sale. So Brad gave up picks 212 and 304 to Sam to acquire the services of one Derek Carr. However, Sam never used either of these picks, flipping them in other trades. Therefore, Sam technically averaged 0 points per week from his side of the trade. So how is this trade so fair? Well, aside from Derek Carr, Brad was able to draft Caleb Williams with the 102, who served as his QB for most of the season. This meant that, for the entire season, Derek Carr was bringing in a massive 3.22 points per week. Hey, remember last year where I mentioned a trade involving Sam and Brad in the longest yard that had draft picks for 3 years? Yeah, well Brad was finally able to use some of those draft picks, drafting Bears wide receiver Rome Odunze. Let's see how that went. Sam's Stephon Diggs continued to rake in points until suffering a season-ending injury in Week 8. Meanwhile, Odunze went in and out of Brad's team throughout the season. Despite all of this, Diggs was still averaging 3.57 points per week more for Sam, despite missing the final 6 weeks of the season. But don't worry, there's still a draft pick to come. We will see this trade again. Wow, a trade that doesn't involve Sam or Brad this time. We find Brooke and Hamish involved here, in the league Dynasty League name. Hamish wanted to move up in the draft, and Brooke had a couple of second round picks with his name on it. Hamish ended up receiving picks 206 and 209, in which he drafted Xavier Legette and Jermaine Burton. Brooke, on the other hand, received pick 307, which he used to draft Troy Franklin. Okay, so Brooke also got Hamish's first round pick for the next year, but we can't look that up until the next year now, can we? Already having Bo Nix on his team, Brooke was excited to see Troy Franklin, hoping for a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase kind of deal. However, Troy Franklin never left Brooke's taxi squad, so he obviously averaged 0 points per week. However, Hamish's lads were sparsely used too, only averaging 3.71 points per week. This still won him the trade this year, but do remember that Brooke has his 104 for the next year draft. Guys, it's been one trade without Brad and Sam in them, so let's bring them both back, eh? Brad, having secured Derek Carr and Caleb Williams, and already having Joe Burrow on his squad, had no need for Dak Prescott. You know who did need a QB after trading away Derek Carr? Sam. Sam gave away Javonte Williams, as well as his first round next year, to get Dak Prescott onto his team. While Dak did go down injured halfway through the season, Javonte struggled to get game time on Brad's team. Dak averaged 8.89 points per week for Sam, whereas Javonte only averaged 4.39 points, meaning that Sam averaged a solid 3.97 points more per week. So next up is a Sam and Brad trade in the longest yard. Don't worry, this is the final trade between them, thankfully. This was a draft day trade, with Sam giving up 2 second round picks to move up to pick 203, also securing pick 410. With his 2 picks, Brad picked up Adonai Mitchell and Ricky Pearsall. Sam, picking up Keon Coleman with pick 203, ended the draft by picking up Brendan Rice at pick 410. Despite 4 players being involved in this trade, only 1 player got game time out of the 4 of them, being Keon Coleman. He ended up averaging 5.29 points per week for Sam, which obviously means that Sam averaged 5.29 points per week more than Brad. Okay, now we're getting into the larger differences in averages per week. It's the return of the CeeDee Lamb JSN and first round pick between Brooke and Hamish. Did Brooke hit on his first round pick? Well, he ended up with Rome Odunze, so take that as you may. Aside from players like Adam Thielen, Mike Evans, and JSN on the team, Adunze also had to compete with Brooks' other first-round draft pick in Xavier Worthy. This means that despite having 2 wide receivers compared to Hamish's 1, Hamish still averaged 8.3 points more than Brook in this side of the trade. With Joe Mixon heading to the Texans, Brad was sad and didn't want to play with him anymore. Hamish wanted him, so he sent an offer to Brad. Eventually, the two of them agreed on a trade that also involved sending Mixon's handcuff and Dameon Pierce in exchange for Ladd McConkey. Both Mixon and McConkey ended up being integral parts of their respective owners' rosters, putting up some big scores some weeks. However, both of them also missed some time being injured. In the end, Mixon outscored McConkey by an average of 8.77 points per week, meaning that Hamish ended better off from this trade so far. But how did Hamish end up with Ladd McConkey? Well, that takes us to our most unfair trade of the year. Hamish and Brad had another trade, with Brad giving up Antonio Gibson, pick 108, which became Jonathan Brooks, and pick 201, Ladd McConkey, to get himself Zach Moss, pick 109, which became Bo Nix, pick 204, which became Trey Benson, and pick 304, which became Jermaine Burton. Hamish did have Ladd McConkey for 4 weeks, but the others from his trade didn't help much, and he ended up averaging 0.97 points per week. Oof. Brad's side wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire. Burton and Benson didn't do much, and Moss was quickly replaced by Chase Brown, which just left Brad's favourite player as of typing this, playoff Bo Nix. Once he got over his initial struggles, Nix became a great QB for Brad, helping his team average a mammoth 14.76 points per week for Brad, meaning that he, on average, scored 13.79 points more than Hamish did, meaning that finally, Brook is not the worst trader this year. It's time for the Fabulous Awards, which is a collection of different awards. The Burning Pockets Award goes to the owner who spent all of their fab first. Last year, it only took a couple of weeks for Brad to burn through all of his fab. This year, it took until the final week, in which Kelsey spent her final $71 on 2 QBs. Of course, with the luck that Kelsey had been having, one of these QBs proceeded to instantly get injured. The most fabulous owner goes to the owner who spent the most fab throughout the year. Despite not spending all of his total fab, Brad earns this award due to the fact that he received $25 worth of fab in a trade with Brook. He ended up spending a total of $123 on fab on all of his players, beating Kelsey, who obviously spent $100. The Cheap Ass Motherfucker Award goes to the owner who lost the most bids on waiver wire additions. And would you believe that Brad has ended up with this award too? He lost a total of 6 waiver wire additions to higher bids. The best value player goes to the players who scored the most points per fab dollar spent on them. In third place, we have Darnell Mooney. Matt spent a whopping $6 on Mooney, being rewarded with 95 points from him, meaning he averaged just shy of 16 points per dollar. Not bad, but not as good as our second place pick, Tyrone Tracy. Oh look, Matt's back again, this time only spending $2 on the Giants running back. Tracy was beginning to overtake Devin Singletary, which was evident from some of his scores in the following weeks. He finished with 80.5 points, meaning that he made 40.25 points per dollar. Before I get to the best player, I need to mention the worst player. Now, a lot of players didn't make any points for their team, but most of them had less than $5 of fab spent on them. Not Drew Lock, however. Kelsey spent a whopping $40 fab on Horsecock Lock, and she never even used him, not even in the playoffs. If we had to say that they had to have scored points, then Justice Hill is easily the worst. Huff spent a whopping 41 points on the Ravens running back, and how much did Huff score him? 1.4 points. That's worth 0.03 points per dollar. Anyway, in first place, the best value player outscored Tyrone Tracy by double the amount. Because that player is Chuba Hubbard. With Jonathan Brooks on the PUP list to start the season, Brook picked up Chuba Hubbard to fill that gap on his roster. But between Kenneth Walker and his injuries, as well as his disappointing wide receiver core, Brooke began to use Hubbard more and more. And this was definitely earned, with Hubbard making 166.9 points, averaging 83.45 points per dollar of fab spent on him. And finally, the Not Moneyball Award. This goes to the team who had the most fab spent on their players. In third place, we have the Colts, with 63 fab dollars spent on them. Most of this fab came from bids on Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce, but a couple of separate AD Mitchell picks helped them get to third place. In second place, we have the 49ers. This all came down to their running backs. Jordan Mason brought in $36, Isaac Garendo brought in $23, and it took a $5 bid for Brandon Allen to get this team to second place on $64. Before I get to first place, I just want to give a shout out to the Saints. For most of the season, there was 0 fab spent on them. However, after being dropped, Hamish spent a massive $50 fab on Derek Carr, which took them from last place to first place at the time. The Saints ended up finishing in 5th place on this list, but for a while they were leading the pack, thanks to Hamish and his love for Derek Carr. Anyway, in first place though, we have a tie. A total of 66 fab dollars was spent both on the Ravens and the Raiders. The Ravens' money came from 2 bids, $25 for Rashad Bateman and the aforementioned $41 for Justice Hill, whereas the Raiders were spread over 4 players. However, just like the Ravens, one big bid for a single player really helped this team get ahead. For the Raiders, this was Aidan O'Connell, who had $31 spent to acquire his services. Not every player can play every week. For those players, we have this award, the Sub Me In Coach Award. This award is given to the players who scored the most total of points while sitting on the bench. Since quarterbacks usually win the top 3 here, I'll be looking at each position as well as the top 3 total. Shockingly, the top 3 are all quarterbacks. In third place, we have a rookie QB. This QB had to battle against Tua Tagovailoa and Jaden Daniels for a starting spot. Of course, with Tua's injury, this QB did get a few weeks to shine and did actually play a decent amount of time. His active points scored was about 10 points less than his bench scores, and this goes to show how important Bo Nix was to Huff's team. An arguable starting QB on a lot of the other teams here, Nix shared the QB2 spotlight, leading to his 3rd placement here. In second place, we have yet another unfortunate QB situation. Being drafted in the 3rd round for Brad, you'd think this QB would be an instant starter. However, due to various injuries to his teammates, the emergence of Justin Fields for a few weeks, Kirk Cousins and his Buccaneers escapades, and Patrick Mahomes being, Patrick Mahomes, poor old Brock Purdy didn't get many starts. Out of a possible 13 opportunities, Purdy only started 4, as Brad struggled to decide which of his QBs should be starting. Impressively, Purdy's active score was only 30 points behind his bench score, despite having many more games started there. And then, in first place, we have a player who I was impressed that they'd scored enough points in general to make this list. He only started 1 game for Kelsey, playing when Caleb Williams had the bye, and he only made 5 points. Then, heading into the bye week, he was benched. And when I say benched, I mean super benched. He didn't drop to QB2, or even QB3. Instead, he was relegated to QB4 before being released. That's right, good old Danny Dimes has won an award this year. He was the best bench warmer this year. His 144 points beats out Brock Purdy by a massive 3 points, winning himself and Kelsey the award this year. As for the other positions, the best running back bench warmer was Bucky Irving. With Matt having Saquon, Mixon and Rashad White already, Bucky was relegated to a in case of emergency role. Matt didn't really think about starting him until week 6 when Rashad White was out with injury, and even though he scored 18.5 points, he still went straight back to the bench. It wasn't until the final few weeks, where Bucky was putting up scores of mid to high 20s, that Matt brought him back. Despite this, Bucky still made 125 points on the bench. The best wide receiver actually played a lot of games for Brad. However, horrific quarterback play led to low single-digit scores, sending him to the bench. Things seemed to improve, with a couple of mid-teen scores, followed by a near 30 bomb. Brad decided enough was enough, and he started this man once again, only to bench him the next week. Unfortunately for Brad, that game was the revenge game for him. And even though the Browns lost that game, Jerry Jeudy had a day. 235 receiving yards and a touchdown netted him 44 points for Brad's bench. In total, Jerry scored 119 points for Brad's bench, netting him the highest bench score for a wide receiver. Unlike the other positions, tight end didn't even get to triple digits. And almost all of this person's points came in week 1 against the Chiefs. With only one tight end spot, Skeeto obviously would have started Kyle Pitts over Isaiah Likely. And while Pitts did make 12, Likely made 28. This, combined with a rough start of the season for Andrews, led Skeeto to starting Likely in week 2. After he made 4 points, he was relegated to the bench and never saw the light of day again. Overall, tight end points scored were very low this year, and a couple of 20-point games led to Isaiah Likely winning first place for bench scores by tight ends. Next up is the highest single week score for each position on the bench. Since I just mentioned Likely, I might as well start with the tight ends. That aforementioned week 1 score by Isaiah Likely led the tight ends until Jonnu Smith took over in week 11 with a 31-point game. Worst of all, for Brooke at that point, if you had combined the total score of the 2 tight ends that he had started that week and multiplied it by 3, Jonnu Smith would have still outscored them all. Speaking of players who took over the highest score at the end of the season, we have Zach Charbonnet. With Kenneth Walker out, Charbonnet became the running back number 1, and he sure fucking made sure to show everyone that. 134 rushing yards and 2 TDs, alongside 7 receptions for 59 receiving yards, led to 41 points for Kane on his bench. Not that Kane needed him, however, as that week Kane had already secured the victory by 62 points. As I'd mentioned earlier, Brad had issues guessing which QB to start each week, and this was evident in week 5. Losing by 10 points to Tom, Brad would have loved to have had Big Kirko on the starting roster. This was the 500-yard Bucks game, where he netted 44 points. Meanwhile, Brad's highest starting QB was Justin Fields, who put up 19.94 points, meaning that no matter if he had started him over Fields or Mahomes, he would have beaten Tom that week. And lastly, we have the wide receiver. While a lot of people think that this is probably going to be Jerry Jeudy, a lot of people also seem to have forgotten about this player here. With Debo out that week, many people expected Brandon Ayuk to have a great game. He didn't have that great game. Juwan motherfucking Jennings had that great game. 175 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns, 46 points fantasy-wise. Worst of all for Skeeto, Jennings had outscored all of his starting wide receivers by at least 10 points. It is now time for the Doiz 2024 Pro Bowl roster. These are the players who have scored the most points for their team in their respective positions. AFC: Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, captain, Garrett Wilson, Tyreek Hill, Zay Flowers, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, James Cook, Najee Harris. The backups: Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Kenneth Walker, replaced with Chuba Hubbard, Nico Collins, Mark Andrews, Tony Pollard, and Chase Brown. The NFC: Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Saquon Barkley, captain, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Terry McLaurin, George Kittle, Trey McBride, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Josh Jacobs. The backups: Jared Goff, Jaden Daniels, Kyron Williams, Malik Neighbors, Cole Kmet, David Montgomery, and Drake London. Congratulations to everyone on your 2024 Pro Bowl selections. Diamond in the Rough Award is given to a player who went undrafted but ended up averaging the most points after being picked up from free agency. Raheem the Dream Mostert won this award last year, as his time on Brooks' team included the 70 steamer game the Dolphins dropped on the Broncos. Let's see who's won it this year. In third place, we have a similar player to Raheem Mostert. Chuba Hubbard was brought in as a backup, taking Jonathan Brooks' spot while he rested on the PUP list. Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker were pillars to Brooks' running back room, but a lot of his wide receivers were desperately letting him down. So, Brooks started playing Chuba Hubbard in one of his flex spots, hoping for some points. And boy did he get some points. Chuba absolutely killed it, averaging a total of 16.7 points per start on his way to his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season. In second place, we have an issue. I have ranked these players both on their score per week, as well as their score per start. While Chuba Hubbard and the first place winner would finish first and third in their places either way, second place would be different. If we looked at points per start, elite Joe Flacco would be second. He scored 17.3 points per start due to only starting 2 games before being dropped. However, if we go points per week, then second place would go to Zach Ertz with his 14.15 points per week. While I could figure out a way to decide which of these two deserve it more, I'll just say fuck it, they both finished second place. Before I get to number 1, I have to mention a couple of honourable mentions. Firstly, Isaac Garendo averaged 26.8 points per start and per week due to being picked up in week 14. However, due to only being 1 week, I have disqualified him, as well as Trey Sermon, 18.3, and Amir Abdullah, 17.5. Anyway, in first place, it's the one and only Sam Darnold. This is actually a wild thing to think about, as if we go points by week, his score would be divided by 13 instead of 2 or 3 like most of the other players on this list. While Darnold was averaging 14.6 points per week, he was averaging a whopping 23.7 points per start, which easily netted him first place in this award. Similarly to the previous award, the unwanted players have another award in the One Man's Trash award. This is given to the player who averages the most points after being dropped and picked up by a different team. This was won by Desmond Ridder, of all players last year, which tells you all you need to know about how easy it is to win this award. Let's see who did it this year. In third place, we have Patrick Mahomes. You may be thinking, who would drop Patrick Mahomes? But I forgot to mention in the intro to this, is that it also includes players that were traded, which is what happened to Mahomes. Whilst on Brad's team, he averaged 19.2 points per week, due to an unusually disappointing beginning to Mahomes' 2024 season. I mean, it's still a decent score for a QB, but when he joined Brooks' team, he was averaging 27.5 points per week, meaning that he averaged a total of 8.62 points more on Brooks' team than on Brad's. And following up with that, we have second place, which goes to the other player Brooke received in the trade, Calvin Ridley. Ridley only averaged 9.5 points for Brad over the first 8 weeks, before latching on to Mahomes and actually being a decent wide receiver for Brooke for once. In 2021 and in 2023, Calvin Ridley burnt Brooke at least once. And after saying he'd never pick him up again, here he was starting him in the year 2024. That ended up being a good choice for Brooke, as Calvin Ridley averaged 18 points per week, meaning that he averaged 8.5 points more on Brooks' team than on Brad's team. Before we get to first place, I have to mention a few honourable mentions. These players all scored no points on their original team, so whatever they averaged on their new team became the average difference, which would completely skew the data, which is why I haven't included them. Jatavion Sanders averaged 8.35 points more on Brooks' team the second time than he did the first time. Tyrone Tracy averaged just over 10 points for Matt compared to the 0 he made on Brooks' team. Kareem Hunt averaged just under 12 points for, ironically, Sam. Get it? Both their last names are Hunt. Compared to the 0 he made on, again, Brooks' team. Russell Wilson averaged just under 17 points for Brad after being traded to his team from Brooks' team. And, despite spending 2 weeks on Brooks' team, Isaac Garendo averaged 26.8 points more on Hamish's team, due to the fact that Brooke never started him, and Hamish started him for 1 week. Whilst Brooke got third and second place for players from Brad's team, don't feel too bad for Brad, as he's taken out the top spot here. Brees Hall did average a solid 15.8 points for Brooke, but once he made it to Brad's team, he was averaging 24.7 points due to a big 30 bomb 1 week and also missing time due to injury. Despite this, he did average 8.93 points more on Brad's team, leading to Brad winning this award. The next award is the Hindsight is 2020 award. This is given to a player whose bench score outscores a different player's active score. However, these need to be the same position, even if they're in the flex spot. DK Metcalf and his big Week 13 game last year won this award. Can we see a similar game this year? In third place, just like with DK Metcalf last year, we have a game from Week 13. In a game against the Broncos, Jameis Winston had himself a game. He threw for 6 touchdowns, although 2 of them were for the opposition, as well as a 2-point conversion and nearly 5,000 yards passing. He only made 39.98 points this week due to the fact that he lost 12 points from the 2 pick sixes and another interception that he threw. And it turns out he actually lost more points that week than the QB Hamish started in Justin Herbert. Herbert only made 9. This meant that Jameis Winston outscored Justin Herbert by a total of exactly 31 points. In second place, we are not going anywhere. We are staying with that game. Jerry Jeudy had an amazing revenge game against the Broncos, putting up 44.5 points from his 2 TDs, a 2-point conversion, and his 235 receiving yards. If the rules didn't have to include being the same position, Jerry Jeudy would have easily won this, as Brad had started Kirk Cousins, who made a massive 0.1 points this week. However, Brad's receivers were pretty decent, with the worst wide receiver being Michael Pittman's 9.2. This meant that Jerry Jeudy only outscored him by 35.9. Before I get to number 1, I have a couple of dishonourable mentions. Firstly, speaking of Week 13 Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy also had a horror week that week, only making 2.16 points. However, that meant that he still would have outscored Kirk Cousins by 2.06 points. In Week 10, Ray Davis would have outscored Tank Bigsby by only 0.2 points. This doesn't sound bad until I tell you that Ray Davis only made 0.6 points. Lastly, Jameson Williams outscored Xavier Worthy in Week 9. The only issue? Jameson Williams was suspended that week, but his 0 points was a whole point more than what Xavier Worthy made. In first place, who else could it be? Juwan Jennings made 46.5 points, which is already a huge number on its own. But that was also the week that Mike Evans only made 3.7. This meant that barely any score was taken off Juwan Jennings' score, meaning he outscored Evans by a whopping 42.8 points, the highest of the year. The penultimate award is here now, and it's the I'll Show You, You'll See award. This is given to the player who had a bad outing, got benched, and then outscored their previous week's score by the most. This needs to be consecutive weeks, unless the player is injured or the team is on the bye. DK Metcalf went back-to-back, winning this award last year as well, from the same game. Can he win this award again? Can Juwan Jennings do a DK Metcalf and win this award as well? Let's find out. In third place, we have Matt and Laird McConkey. With Amari Cooper being traded to the Bills and scoring a touchdown last week, Matt really wanted to start him. And, with Laird McConkey only making 9.6 points the week before, he was benched. This was a big mistake, however, as Amari Cooper had 1 reception and McConkey had 111 yards. He put up a whopping 32 points, outscoring himself by 22.5 points. In second place, we have a player who gave Brad a lot of issues. While he knew who his QB1 was, Brad switched between Kirk Cousins, Brock Purdy, and Justin Fields, trying to find his QB2. Usually, whenever he started Kirk Cousins, he would be disappointed and would bench him, only for Cousins to ball out and find his way back into the starting lineup. And then this would repeat again and again. 1 week, Brad had started him, but he only put up just over 9 points. Brad ended up benching Cousins after this, But the one mistake that he made in doing so was not realizing that Kirk Cousins was taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers the next week. Cousins absolutely laid pipe on the Buccaneers. While he didn't throw for nearly 500 yards like the previous time he took them on, he did throw for 4 touchdowns, which bumped his points up to 38, meaning he improved his score by 29.46 points. And we're back to Brad, again, for first place. You guys remember how Jerry Jeudy made 45.5 points on Brad's bench from the last award? Well, the previous week, he was starting and made 14.5 points. Now, if my abacus is correct, that is a flat 30-point improvement from the week before, meaning that he just nudged out Cousins for first place here by less than a point. And finally, we have the Down Since Day One award. This is given to the team whose week 1 roster would have scored the most total points if they were unable to switch it. Matt won this award last year with a really great roster. Can he do it again this year? In last place, we have the guy who only won 4 points this year in Skeeto. Aaron Rodgers would have easily been his best player, or a lot of the rest of his lineup missed time, such as Anthony Richardson, Zach Moss, Mike Evans, Travis Etienne, Cooper Kupp, and Tank Dell. He would have only made 1,441 points if he had just stuck with that team. Rather surprisingly, Brad would be in 9th place. Well, it was, until I looked at his team and saw Raishi Rice and Isaiah Pacheco starting. They only just made over 100 points between them due to missing a lot of time due to injury. He also started Justin Fields, which was fine until he got benched for Russell Wilson and never made it back into the starting lineup. Also, starting 2 tight ends in his lineup during a bad year for tight ends did not help. All of this somehow managed to drag both Mahomes and Gibbs down this low to 9th place. Mr. Toilet Bowl himself, Brooke, is here in 8th place. Just like I mentioned for Brad, Brooke also started 2 tight ends, both of them having missed time too. Same goes for Kenneth Walker. Meanwhile, DJ Moore and Michael Pittman Jr. were disappointing. Oh, and look, there's Deontay Johnson. If it wasn't for Scary Terry and his 2 QBs of Stroud and Murray, Brooke would have been so much lower. He might have won the whole thing last year, but this year, Tom barely beat out Brooke for 7th place here. Aside from Christian Kirk, most of his team was pretty solid, most of them putting up above 100 points. And then we have Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen, who pumped this team up to even higher standards. The final 4th man from the Toilet Bowl playoffs is now up, with Huff in 6th place. Brandon Ayuk only put up 63 before going down injured, but thankfully for him, that was the only disappointment. Kelsey, Tyreek, Flowers, and Kittle all put up over 150, and Achane put up over 200. Hell, even Chris Godwin, who also got injured early on in the season, made 143 points. But the cherry on top was his boy, his quarterback, Jaden Daniels, 306 points, helping him get to 1,788 points. Everyone's favourite Wahine is here in 5th place, being Kelsey. Again, there was only one player, Chris Olave, who went down early, but like a good team, the rest of her players rallied around him to lift her team up. Cole Kmet put up above 100, which is a great score for tight ends. And Daniel Jones was nowhere near his starting lineup, which really helped. You know who was though? His wide receiver 1 at the time, Malik Neighbors. He put up 180 and wasn't even the highest rookie on her team, as Caleb Williams put up 241. And hey, you know it's going to be a good time when Lamar almost puts up 400 points. First team with all of their players above 100 is here at 4th. This goes to Kane. Only one real disappointment, but this was Stephon Diggs, who went down mid-season, still outscoring a lot of players who played the entire time. Trevor Lawrence was a low point QB points-wise, but still, 170 points is nothing to piss away. There were 3 non-QB players on his team that absolutely raked in the points, being Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and JSN, and the near 300 points from Jared Goff was just the cherry on top. Only 14 points ahead of him was Matt, last year's winner. His Eagles stack put up 643 points alone, and everyone else was, fine. He had started Rashad White over Bucky Irving, so that's where he could have improved, but you can't really complain with 3rd place. This just leaves the top 2 lads, the champ and the runner-up, Sam and Hamish. Which one of these guys took out the top spot? The crazy thing is, whoever finished first finished ahead of second place by just under 200 points. And that second place finisher is Hamish. Hamish's team here is very balanced. For every Jamar Chase, we have a Dallas Goddard. King Henry and Alvin Kamara put up 500, Worthy and Waddle 270. For every big boy he had a small boy too, balancing him out and putting him in second place. So, how did Sam take out the top spot? Let's have a look at his team, eh? Baker Mayfield, 321. Josh Jacobs, 229. Kyron Williams, 223. Jay Jettis, 243. Garrett Wilson, 200. Sam Laporta, 114. DK Metcalf, 155. Roma Dunze, 125. David Montgomery, 217. And Joe Burrow, 374. Yep, that'll do it. Everyone did their part for his team, some more than others. Getting just under 700 from his QBs is diabolical, and having 5 skill players making over 200 just really pushed him over the edge, taking out the top spot this year. And that brings to an end this year's awards ceremony. Congratulations to everyone who won an award, and get good to those who didn't. Congratulations to Sam for winning the whole thing, and congratulations to Brooke for your trophy win. Thank you all for sitting through this, and I hope to see you guys again this coming Tuesday for our next episode, Madden Highlights 52, A-Rich Unleashed. Bye guys. See, this is how you wave to people. Not, you don't have to go like this. Outro.